The cruelest kind of abandonment is the one that happens while you are still holding someone's child in your arms. The hospital hallway smelled like antiseptic and burnt coffee, cold enough to make Aaliyah Carter pull the thin blanket tighter around her newborn son. Outside the tall windows, rain slid down the glass in silver streaks, blurring the lights of downtown Chicago into soft halos. She sat alone beneath the buzzing fluorescent lights, still wearing the pale blue hospital gown that barely warmed her skin. Her son slept against her chest, tiny fingers curled near her collarbone, completely unaware that his father had just chosen another woman over them. Aaliyah looked down at the baby and kissed his forehead slowly, trying to silence the ache building behind her ribs. 40 minutes earlier, Ryan Mitchell had stood in this same hallway with one hand inside the pocket of his expensive charcoal coat and the other wrapped around the wrist of Vanessa Green, the woman he had spent the last year hiding behind late-night business meetings and unanswered calls. Ryan did not yell. That somehow made it worse. His voice stayed calm, almost bored, while Aaliyah stood there exhausted after 16 hours of labor. "This isn't working anymore," he had said quietly, glancing at the baby only once. "Vanessa and I are together now. I already signed the transfer papers for the condo. You can stay with your mother for a while." The words had landed softly, but they cut deeper than screaming ever could. Aaliyah remembered staring at him, unable to fully process what she was hearing. Just 3 years earlier, Ryan had cried while sliding a diamond ring onto her finger on Navy Pier while fireworks exploded over Lake Michigan. He used to bring her vanilla lattes every morning before work. He used to kiss her forehead before leaving the apartment. Back then, she believed love looked like consistency. She did not realize betrayal could wear the same familiar face. Vanessa had shifted uncomfortably beside him, her heels clicking against the polished hospital floor. She avoided looking directly at Aaliyah, though the smugness still lingered around her mouth. Ryan checked his watch halfway through the conversation, impatient, like missing dinner reservations mattered more than the woman who had just given birth to his son. Then he reached into his wallet and pulled out a folded envelope. Cash. Not enough to rebuild a life. Just enough to erase guilt. Aaliyah never touched it. Her fingers tightened around the baby instead. For a moment, nobody spoke. The hallway filled only with distant intercom announcements and the quiet hum of vending machines. Ryan finally exhaled and stepped back toward Vanessa. "Take care of yourself," he muttered before turning away. And just like that, he left. No apology. No hesitation. Just polished shoes disappearing down the hallway beside another woman. Aaliyah watched until they vanished behind the elevator doors. Then the silence came crashing down around her. Her eyes burned, but she refused to cry. Not there. Not for him. She adjusted the blanket around her son and slowly stood on trembling legs. The rain outside grew heavier as she walked toward the exit alone, carrying everything she had left in the world inside her arms. 3 days later, the city looked different from the back seat of a rideshare with a newborn sleeping beside her. Chicago no longer felt like the place where Aaliyah Carter had once built a life with Ryan Mitchell. It felt colder now, heavier somehow, like every building downtown carried a memory she no longer wanted to touch. Snow drifted lightly across the sidewalks as the driver turned onto the narrow street where her mother lived on the south side. The old brick apartment building looked smaller than she remembered, the front steps dusted in white, the porch light flickering against the gray afternoon sky. Aaliyah stared out the window quietly while her son slept beneath layers of blankets inside the car seat beside her. She had not spoken much since leaving the hospital. Exhaustion wrapped around her body like wet cement. Her stitches still hurt every time she shifted in her seat, but she refused to complain. Pain had become strangely quiet inside her. The driver unloaded her single suitcase onto the curb while icy wine rushed down the street. Aaliyah thanked him softly before lifting the baby carrier with trembling hands. The weight was not heavy, but her body still felt fragile from childbirth and heartbreak happening almost at the same time. Her mother opened the apartment door before Aaliyah could knock. Denise Carter stood there in wool socks and a faded burgundy sweater, eyes immediately filling with tears at the sight of her daughter, holding a newborn alone. "Oh, baby," she whispered, pulling the door wider without asking questions. The apartment smelled like cinnamon tea and laundry detergent. Familiar. Safe. Aaliyah stepped inside slowly while heat from the radiator warmed her cold cheeks. She had not realized how badly she needed somewhere to breathe until that moment. Denise took the baby gently into her arms, rocking him instinctively while staring down at his tiny face. "He looks like you," she murmured. Aaliyah almost laughed at that. Everyone else had said he looked exactly like Ryan. Maybe mothers only saw the parts worth loving. That night, while snow continued falling outside the windows, Aaliyah sat awake on the old pull-out couch in the living room listening to her son breathe. The apartment was silent except for the occasional hiss of traffic outside and the soft ticking of the kitchen clock. Across the room, her phone lit up for the first time in hours. Ryan's name appeared on the screen. Her chest tightened automatically. She stared at it without moving. One missed call, then another. Finally, a message appeared beneath them. "Did you make it there okay?" Aaliyah read the sentence twice before placing the phone face down on the coffee table. The cruelty of it almost made her smile. Not, "I am sorry." Not, "How is my son?" Just a question empty enough to help him sleep at night. She closed her eyes briefly and remembered all the moments she ignored while trying to save her marriage. The canceled dinners. The perfume on his shirts that was not hers. The way Ryan slowly stopped looking at her whenever she spoke. Deep down, she had felt him leaving long before he actually walked away. She just kept hoping love could survive neglect if she tried hard enough. Around 2 in the morning, her son began crying softly. Aaliyah lifted him carefully against her chest and walked toward the kitchen window while warming a bottle. Outside, snow covered the streetlights in pale gold halos. Everything looked still, peaceful even. She held the baby close while his tiny fingers wrapped around one of hers. Then, for the first time since the hospital, Aaliyah finally allowed herself to whisper the truth out loud. "We are going to survive this." The words barely filled the room, but something inside her shifted after she said them. Not strength exactly. Strength would come later. This was quieter than that. It was the first small piece of dignity returning home. By the second week, exhaustion had settled into Aaliyah Carter's body so deeply that she no longer remembered what rested sleep felt like. Days blended together inside her mother's apartment beneath the pale winter skies of Chicago. Morning bottles became afternoon laundry, and afternoon laundry became long nights pacing the living room floor with her son pressed against her shoulder while old jazz records played softly from the kitchen radio. Outside, February winds rattled the windows hard enough to make the glass tremble. Inside, life had become smaller, quieter, and painfully honest. Aaliyah spent most mornings sitting near the radiator wrapped in an oversized sweatshirt while her son slept across her lap. She watched snow collect along the fire escapes outside and tried not to think about the life she used to have downtown. The luxury apartment, the rooftop dinners, the polished marble counters Ryan used to brag about whenever guests visited. Funny how quickly expensive things stopped mattering when someone made you feel disposable inside your own marriage. Denise moved carefully around the apartment each morning before leaving for her nursing shift at St. Mary's Hospital. Some days she kissed Aaliyah's forehead before walking out the door. Other days, she simply squeezed her shoulder silently, understanding there were wounds words could not reach. One afternoon, while the baby slept inside a bassinet beside the couch, Aaliyah opened social media for the first time since giving birth. The screen glowed cold against her face as photos loaded one after another. Ryan stood smiling inside a downtown restaurant beside Vanessa, both dressed in black, champagne glasses raised beneath soft golden lighting. Another photo showed them in Aspen standing beside snow-covered pine trees wrapped in matching winter coats. Vanessa's caption read, "New Beginnings." Aaliyah stared at the words until they blurred together. Her thumb hovered over the screen for several seconds before she quietly locked the phone and placed it face down beside her. No tears came this time. That surprised her most. The pain was still there, but it had changed shape. It no longer burned wildly. It sat deeper now, colder and sharper, like a scar beginning to harden beneath skin. Later that evening, Denise returned home carrying grocery bags while humming softly under her breath. She immediately noticed the silence in the room. "You saw something," she said gently while unpacking vegetables onto the kitchen counter. Aaliyah looked down at her son sleeping peacefully beside her. "He already moved on like none of this mattered," she whispered. Denise stopped moving for a moment. Then she crossed the kitchen slowly and sat beside her daughter on the couch. "Baby, some people replace others because they cannot sit alone with themselves," she said quietly. But that has nothing to do with your worth. Aaliyah swallowed hard. She wanted to believe those words, but abandonment had a way of making people question their reflection. That night, after feeding the baby around midnight, Aaliyah stood in the bathroom staring at herself beneath harsh fluorescent light. Dark circles rested beneath her eyes. Her curls were tied loosely into a tired bun. Stretch marks traced faint lines across her skin. She barely recognized the woman in the mirror. Yet when she looked closer, she noticed something else hidden beneath the exhaustion. She was still standing, still waking up every morning, still holding her child with gentle hands despite everything breaking around her. Ryan had expected her to collapse under humiliation. Instead, she kept surviving one quiet day at a time. Aaliyah rested her palm against the sink and exhaled slowly. Somewhere deep inside her, beneath the grief and betrayal, a small dangerous thought began forming for the first time. Maybe losing him was not the end of her story. Maybe it was the beginning of the woman she was supposed to become. Across the apartment, her son began crying softly through the baby monitor. Aaliyah wiped beneath her eyes once and walked toward him without hesitation. Spring arrived slowly that year, melting the last layers of Chicago snow into dirty streams along the sidewalks, while Aaliyah Carter quietly rebuilt herself one ordinary morning at a time. By April, her son Elijah had started sleeping through most nights, and the apartment no longer felt like a place of survival alone. It had become the beginning of something steadier. Sunlight returned through the kitchen windows earlier now, spilling warm gold across the old hardwood floors while Denise brewed coffee before leaving for work. Some mornings, Aaliyah sat near the window feeding Elijah while jazz music drifted softly through the apartment and traffic hummed below the fire escape outside. Life was still difficult, but it no longer felt broken beyond repair. One afternoon, while Elijah napped beside her wrapped in a cream-colored blanket, Aaliyah opened her laptop for the first time in months. Dust lingered near the keyboard. The screen reflected her face back at her briefly before lighting up. She hesitated for a moment, fingers resting still above the keys. Before marriage, before Ryan's promotions and business dinners and expensive vacations, Aaliyah had built freelance branding concepts for small Black-owned businesses around Chicago. Design used to make her feel alive. She remembered staying awake until midnight sketching logos while music played through tiny apartment speakers back when she and Ryan were newly engaged and dreaming together. Somewhere along the way, she stopped creating and started supporting his dreams instead. That realization settled quietly inside her chest while she reopened old project folders. Hours passed unnoticed. Elijah slept peacefully while soft rain tapped against the windows, and Aaliyah worked through forgotten instincts returning to her hands naturally. Colors, typography, layouts, branding concepts. For the first time in nearly a year, her mind focused on something other than betrayal. By evening, she had completed a sample branding package for a local bakery she found online. It was not perfect, but it was hers. Denise stood behind her reading over her shoulder while removing her hospital badge after work. "You still got it," she said softly with a smile. Aaliyah looked at the screen quietly. The compliment warmed something fragile inside her. A week later, she submitted 3 freelance applications while Elijah bounced gently in a secondhand baby swing beside her desk. Rejection emails arrived quickly at first. Some businesses never responded at all. Others politely explained they wanted agencies with larger portfolios. Still, every morning Aaliyah tried again. There was dignity in effort now. One Friday afternoon, while folding laundry in the living room, her inbox chimed with a new message from a boutique coffee company downtown called South Campus Roasters. The owner had seen her portfolio online and wanted to schedule a consultation for a possible rebrand. Aaliyah stared at the email twice before rereading it aloud softly to herself. Her pulse quickened immediately afterward. It was only one small opportunity. Yet after months of feeling discarded, even a small opportunity felt enormous. The following Tuesday, Denise watched Elijah while Aaliyah rode the train downtown, wearing a simple camel coat and gold earrings she had not touched since before the divorce. The city looked different now through the train windows. Not painful exactly, just unfamiliar, like somewhere she was slowly learning to belong to again without Ryan beside her. South Campus Roasters sat on a quiet corner street near Fulton Market, filled with warm amber lighting and the smell of espresso beans drifting through the air. Young professionals typed on laptops while indie music played softly overhead. Aaliyah stepped inside nervously, smoothing her coat sleeves while scanning the room. Then she heard a calm voice near the counter. "Aaliyah Carter?" She turned slowly toward a tall white man in a navy wool coat, holding 2 coffee cups in one hand. Clean cut, calm eyes, expensive watch hidden beneath his sleeve. There was nothing flashy about him, yet the entire room seemed to shift subtly around his presence. He offered one of the coffees toward her with an easy smile. "I figured you might need this before the meeting starts." Aaliyah accepted the coffee carefully, surprised by how warm the cup felt against her cold fingers. The man standing in front of her carried himself with a calm confidence that did not need attention to prove its existence. He looked to be somewhere in his late 30s, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed simply in dark wool and polished leather shoes that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Yet there was nothing arrogant about him. His expression remained relaxed, almost thoughtful, as though he spent more time observing than speaking. "Thank you," Aaliyah replied softly. "I am Ethan Bennett," he said, extending his hand. "I own South Canvas with my sister." Aaliyah blinked once in surprise before shaking his hand gently. His grip was firm but respectful. "I thought I was meeting with a marketing manager," she admitted. Ethan smiled slightly. "Usually you would. But your portfolio caught my attention." The compliment landed differently than she expected. Not flirtatious. Not performative. Honest. They sat near the windows while morning lights spilled across the cafe tables in pale gold patterns. Ethan listened carefully while Aaliyah presented her branding concepts, occasionally nodding as she explained typography choices and customer engagement ideas. Unlike Ryan, who used to interrupt her constantly during conversations, Ethan never rushed her sentences. He paid attention to details most people ignored. The meeting stretched nearly 2 hours longer than expected. By the end, several empty espresso cups sat scattered across the table beside design sketches and handwritten notes. "You built all this while raising a newborn?" Ethan asked quietly while reviewing her presentation. Aaliyah hesitated briefly before nodding. "Mostly during naps," she answered with a tired smile. Ethan leaned back slightly, studying her for a moment. "That is impressive." Something inside Aaliyah shifted uncomfortably at the sincerity in his voice. She had grown so used to surviving criticism and disappointment that kindness almost felt suspicious now. Before leaving, Ethan offered her a 6-week freelance contract to oversee South Canvas Roasters' rebrand campaign. The number written on the agreement made Aaliyah stare twice before speaking. It was more money than she expected to make in months. "I do not know what to say," she admitted quietly. Ethan capped his fountain pen and slid the paperwork toward her calmly. "You do not have to say anything," he replied. "Just do good work." Outside, downtown Chicago buzzed with spring traffic and sunlight reflecting against glass towers, while Aaliyah walked back toward the train station, clutching the signed contract inside her bag. For the first time in months, she felt something unfamiliar rising beneath her ribs. Possibility. That evening, Denise nearly dropped a dinner plate when Aaliyah told her the news. "Look at you," her mother whispered proudly while Elijah bounced happily in his high chair nearby. "You are coming back to life." Aaliyah smiled softly at that, though part of her still feared happiness could disappear without warning. Over the following weeks, her world slowly expanded beyond heartbreak and exhaustion. Elijah grew heavier in her arms each day, his laughter beginning to fill the apartment during mornings while Aaliyah worked remotely at the kitchen table, surrounded by color palettes and branding mock-ups. Ethan occasionally called during late afternoons to discuss revisions or campaign ideas. Their conversations remained professional, yet strangely easy. Sometimes he asked about Elijah. Other times he sent over lunch deliveries after noticing she forgot to eat during meetings. Small gestures. Quiet gestures. The kind that revealed character more than grand speeches ever could. One rainy Thursday evening, while finalizing packaging concepts on her laptop, Aaliyah received a text message from Ryan for the first time in weeks. "I heard you were working again. Glad things are getting better." She stared at the screen silently while thunder rolled outside the apartment windows. There was no apology attached, no acknowledgement of what he had done, just another carefully measured sentence designed to ease his conscience. Aaliyah placed the phone aside without responding and returned to her work. Across the room, Elijah slept peacefully beneath the glow of a small night light, while jazz music drifted softly through the apartment once more. Aaliyah looked at her designs glowing across the screen and realized something quietly powerful. Ryan was no longer the center of her story anymore. Summer settled over Chicago with long golden evenings and heavy air rolling through the city after sunset. By June, South Canvas Roasters had launched its full rebrand campaign across downtown storefronts, social media advertisements, and glossy magazine features. Aaliyah Carter's designs were everywhere now. Warm earth-tone packaging lined cafe shelves. Elegant typography stretched across billboards near the Magnificent Mile. Customers posted photos online holding coffee cups she had redesigned, while comments praised the brand's fresh identity. Quietly, without announcing it to the world, Aaliyah had started building a name for herself again. One afternoon, she stood outside a South Canvas location downtown, pushing Elijah's stroller beneath bright sunlight, while construction noise echoed across the street. People passed by carrying shopping bags and iced coffees, completely unaware that the woman adjusting the baby blanket beside them had once lost nearly everything. Ethan Bennett stepped out of the cafe holding 2 cold brew coffees and handed one toward her naturally, as if this had become routine between them. "You are officially the reason sales jumped 30% this quarter," he said calmly. Aaliyah laughed softly while accepting the drink. "That sounds dramatic." "It is accurate," Ethan replied. The corners of his mouth lifted slightly afterward, and once again she noticed how different his confidence felt compared to Ryan's. Ryan used attention like oxygen. Ethan seemed almost uncomfortable with it. They walked slowly down the sidewalk together while Elijah babbled happily from inside the stroller. Ethan occasionally pushed the shade cover lower whenever sunlight touched the baby's face. Small details. Thoughtful details. The kind no one performed for applause. "My sister wants you at the Harper Foundation Gala next month," Ethan said casually while stopping near a crosswalk. Aaliyah glanced toward him immediately. "A gala? Annual fundraising event," he explained. "Most of Chicago's business crowd attends. Investors, executives, media people. South Canvas is sponsoring this year." Aaliyah hesitated briefly. The thought of entering rooms filled with wealthy strangers made her stomach tighten unexpectedly. It had been a long time since she stepped into that world without Ryan beside her. Ethan seemed to notice the shift in her expression. "No pressure," he added calmly. "But I think you deserve to be in rooms where your work is respected." The words followed her long after they parted ways later that afternoon. That evening, while Elijah slept peacefully beside a stuffed elephant in his crib, Aaliyah searched the Harper Foundation Gala online from her mother's apartment couch. Crystal chandeliers, black-tie guests, CEOs and politicians smiling beneath flashing cameras. Then her breathing slowed suddenly when she noticed a familiar name listed among the event sponsors. Mitchell Capital Partners. Ryan's company. She stared at the screen silently while distant thunder rolled outside the windows. Of course he would be there. Ryan spent years chasing invitations into rooms exactly like that. The realization sat heavily in her chest. Part of her wanted to decline immediately, avoid the discomfort entirely. But another quieter part of her refused to keep shrinking herself to accommodate someone who once abandoned her. The following week, a garment bag arrived unexpectedly at Denise's apartment. Inside hung a deep emerald evening gown with elegant off-shoulder sleeves and soft satin fabric that caught light like water. No note. Just a small envelope tucked carefully inside the pocket. "For the woman who rebuilt herself without permission. You earned your seat at the table. Ethan." Aaliyah sat quietly at the edge of her bed holding the card between her fingers while evening sunlight painted warm gold across the walls. She had spent so many months trying to survive humiliation that she almost forgot what respect looked like. Not pity. Not rescue. Respect. On the night of the gala, Chicago shimmered beneath summer heat and glowing city lights while Aaliyah stood in front of the mirror fastening a pair of gold earrings Denise had given her years ago. The emerald dress rested perfectly against her skin, elegant without trying too hard. Her curls framed her face softly, while subtle makeup highlighted the confidence slowly returning behind her eyes. Denise appeared quietly in the bedroom doorway holding Elijah against her shoulder. "Look at you," she whispered emotionally. Aaliyah looked at her reflection one final time before reaching for her clutch purse. Somewhere downtown, Ryan Mitchell was probably expecting another glamorous evening filled with attention and admiration. He had no idea the woman he discarded was about to walk back into his world looking nothing like the person he left behind. The Harper Foundation Gala glittered above downtown Chicago like a different universe entirely. Crystal chandeliers reflected across polished marble floors, while soft piano music drifted through the ballroom beneath towering golden ceilings. Waiters moved elegantly between guests carrying champagne trays, while cameras flashed near the entrance every few seconds. Luxury perfume, expensive suits, diamonds catching warm light from every direction. The kind of room Ryan Mitchell had spent years trying to belong to. A black sedan stopped beneath the front entrance canopy shortly after 8 o'clock. Aaliyah Carter stepped out slowly, smoothing the emerald satin against her waist while city lights shimmered behind her. Conversations near the entrance quieted almost immediately. Not because she demanded attention, but because confidence carried differently when it came from someone who had suffered and survived quietly. Her curls rested softly against one shoulder, gold earrings glimmering beneath the chandeliers while the deep emerald dress made her skin glow warmly against the evening light. Ethan Bennett stepped out beside her moments later wearing a perfectly tailored black tuxedo and calm expression, one hand adjusting the button near his wrist while photographers immediately recognized him. "Ethan, over here," voices called near the carpet. Camera flashes burst repeatedly around them. Ethan glanced toward Aaliyah gently. "You okay?" he asked quietly. Aaliyah inhaled once before nodding. "I am now." Inside the ballroom, conversations flowed around billion-dollar investments, charity auctions, and political campaigns while jazz musicians played softly near the stage. Ethan remained beside Aaliyah naturally, introducing her to executives, artists, and business owners throughout the evening without once making her feel out of place. Unlike Ryan, who used to treat her like an accessory in public, Ethan listened when she spoke. He stepped back and allowed her talent to fill the room on its own. Near the center bar, a woman from a fashion magazine complimented South Canvas Roasters' rebrand campaign. "Whoever designed it understood emotion," she said. Ethan glanced toward Aaliyah calmly before answering. "She did." Aaliyah looked down briefly, almost overwhelmed by how simple respect could feel when it was genuine. Then everything shifted. Across the ballroom, near the auction display, Ryan Mitchell appeared beside Vanessa Green, holding 2 champagne glasses while laughing with a group of investors. He looked polished as always in a midnight blue tuxedo, confident smile carefully rehearsed for rooms exactly like this. Vanessa wore silver sequins and diamond earrings that sparkled beneath the lights whenever she turned her head. Ryan's laughter faded the moment his eyes landed across the ballroom. For a second, he looked genuinely confused, like his mind could not process what he was seeing. Aaliyah met his stare calmly from across the room, while soft jazz continued playing between them. No anger crossed her face, no bitterness, just quiet composure. Vanessa noticed next. Her smile stiffened immediately. Ryan excused himself from the group almost too quickly, weaving through guests until he stopped a few feet in front of Aaliyah. "Aaliyah," he said slowly, eyes scanning her appearance with visible disbelief. "You look," he paused briefly, struggling for the right word. "Different." Aaliyah held her champagne glass lightly. "People usually do after surviving difficult things," she replied calmly. Ryan glanced toward Ethan standing beside her. Something uncertain flickered across his expression for the first time all night. "I did not know you two knew each other," he said carefully. Ethan extended his hand with composed politeness. "We work together," he answered. Ryan shook his hand automatically, though confusion still lingered behind his eyes. Before he could ask another question, one of the gala organizers approached hurriedly, holding a microphone clipboard. "Mr. Bennett," the woman said warmly, "the board is ready for your speech whenever you are." Ryan's face changed instantly. The color drained subtly beneath his carefully controlled smile. He looked between Ethan and the organizer as realization slowly settled in. "Bennett," he repeated quietly. Ethan adjusted his cufflinks once before nodding politely. "Ethan Bennett. Bennett Holdings." Silence fell heavily between them. Ryan knew the name. Everyone in Chicago business circles knew the name. Bennett Holdings owned investment firms, real estate developments, hospitality groups, and half the commercial properties downtown. Ryan's own company had spent years trying unsuccessfully to secure partnerships with them. Ethan placed one calm hand against the small of Aaliyah's back before guiding her gently toward the stage area. "Come with me," he said softly. Ryan remained standing alone near the ballroom center while guests moved around him in elegant motion blur. For the first time since walking out of that hospital hallway months earlier, he finally understood exactly who he had lost. The ballroom quieted as Ethan Bennett stepped onto the stage beneath the glow of crystal chandeliers and soft amber lights. Conversations faded into murmurs while cameras lifted toward him from every direction. Aaliyah Carter remained near the front beside the stage stairs, one hand resting lightly against her clutch purse while the other brushed calmly along the emerald satin at her side. Across the room, Ryan Mitchell had not moved from where Ethan left him moments earlier. Vanessa stood beside him stiffly now, confusion replacing the polished confidence she arrived with. Ethan adjusted the microphone once, composed as ever. "Good evening," he began smoothly. "Thank you all for supporting the Harper Foundation tonight." His voice carried through the ballroom effortlessly, deep and controlled without needing to demand attention. Aaliyah watched quietly while guests focused entirely on him. She realized then how little she actually knew about the extent of Ethan's influence. Not because he hid it intentionally, but because he never used wealth as performance. That alone separated him from almost every man Ryan admired. Ethan continued speaking about education grants, community investments, and expanding opportunities for underserved neighborhoods across Chicago. No arrogance, no self-congratulation, just purpose. Then midway through the speech, he paused briefly and glanced toward Aaliyah near the front of the stage. "This year," he said calmly, "our company experienced its strongest growth in nearly a decade." Several investors nodded approvingly across the room. Ethan continued, "Not because of me alone. Success rarely belongs to one person." He stepped slightly away from the podium. "Some people rebuild businesses. Others rebuild themselves after life tries to break them. Personally, I think the second takes far more courage." The room grew quieter. Aaliyah felt her heartbeat slow heavily against her ribs as Ethan extended one hand toward her gently. "Aaliyah," he said softly, "would you join me up here?" Dozens of eyes turned toward her immediately. For a brief second, old fear threatened to rise again. The same fear she carried walking through hospital hallways alone. The same fear that once made her feel small beside Ryan's ambitions and judgment. But then she lifted her chin and walked forward steadily beneath the ballroom lights. Ethan helped her onto the stage with quiet ease before facing the crowd once more. "The South Canvas rebrand all of you have spent months praising was created by this woman," he announced. Murmurs spread instantly through the audience. Every campaign, every concept, every design. Aaliyah stood frozen briefly beneath the chandeliers while applause slowly began filling the room around her. Not polite applause, genuine applause. Respect. Across the ballroom, Ryan's expression tightened visibly as investors near him exchanged surprised glances. Some of them already recognized Aaliyah's work from magazines and social campaigns. Others now looked at her with entirely new understanding. Ethan turned toward her calmly. "You earned every bit of this," he said quietly enough that only she could hear it. Emotion rose unexpectedly inside her chest, sharp enough to nearly steal her breath. For so long, she had associated visibility with humiliation. Ryan embarrassed her publicly, abandoned her publicly, reduced her value publicly. Yet standing beneath those chandeliers now, surrounded by applause she actually earned, Aaliyah realized something quietly devastating. The woman Ryan left behind no longer existed. After the speech, guests crowded around her offering congratulations and business cards while photographers captured endless flashes near the stage. Ethan remained nearby, but never overshadowed her moment. He simply watched proudly from a respectful distance while she spoke confidently with executives and investors. Near the back of the ballroom, Ryan finally approached her again alone. Vanessa was nowhere beside him this time. "I had no idea," he admitted quietly once they stood face to face again. Aaliyah met his eyes calmly. "No," she replied softly. "You did not." Ryan looked at her differently now. Not with pity, not with superiority, with regret. Real regret. He glanced toward Ethan across the room before lowering his voice. "I made a mistake." The words hung between them beneath the soft music and chandelier light. Months earlier, Aaliyah might have shattered hearing that sentence. She might have mistaken regret for love. But standing there now, dressed in emerald silk beneath a room full of respect she earned herself, she only felt strangely peaceful. She gave Ryan a small, polite smile before answering. "No," she said quietly. "You made a choice." Then she turned and walked away while the ballroom lights shimmered around her like stars. By the time summer faded into early autumn, Chicago carried that familiar golden chill that arrived just before winter returned. Leaves gathered along sidewalks in soft amber piles while downtown windows reflected pale evening skies across the river. Life had moved forward quietly after the Harper Foundation Gala. Not suddenly, not dramatically, just steadily, like healing finally learning how to breathe on its own. Aaliyah Carter no longer worked from the corner of her mother's kitchen table. South Canvas Roasters had expanded her contract into a full creative partnership, and 2 additional companies reached out after seeing her work at the gala. Most mornings now began inside a bright studio office overlooking West Loop traffic, while Elijah played with wooden blocks in a small corner Ethan had secretly arranged for him beside her desk. Some afternoons, Ethan stopped by carrying coffee and quietly listened while Aaliyah explained campaign ideas beneath walls covered in sketches and color palettes. He never tried to control the room. He simply made space for her to own it. One cold October evening, Aaliyah left the studio later than usual while downtown lights flickered across rain-soaked streets below. Ethan waited near the elevator, holding 2 takeout bags from her favorite soul food restaurant. "You skipped lunch again," he said calmly. Aaliyah laughed softly while taking one of the bags. "You notice everything. Only the things that matter." The words settled warmly inside her chest while they rode the elevator down together. Outside, the city glowed beneath misty rain and traffic lights reflecting against wet pavement. Ethan opened the passenger door of his car for her before walking around to the driver's side. Months ago, gestures like that might have made Aaliyah suspicious. Now they simply felt safe. Later that night, after Elijah had fallen asleep at Denise's apartment, Aaliyah stood quietly near the living room window, watching rain slide down the glass. The city beyond looked calm, distant, peaceful. Her phone vibrated softly against the table behind her. "Ryan Mitchell." She stared at the screen for several seconds before answering. "Hey," Ryan said quietly once she picked up. His voice sounded different now, less polished. "I just wanted to check on Elijah." Aaliyah looked toward the hallway where her son slept peacefully beneath dinosaur print blankets. "He is good," she answered calmly. Silence stretched briefly between them. Then Ryan exhaled heavily. "I saw your interview in Chicago Business Weekly," he admitted. "You looked happy." Aaliyah closed her eyes for a moment. Strange how the man who once made her feel invisible could finally see her only after she stopped needing his approval. "I am happy," she replied softly. Ryan hesitated again before speaking. "I know saying sorry does not change anything," he said carefully. "But losing you was the biggest mistake of my life." Months earlier, hearing those words would have shattered her. She once dreamed about Ryan realizing her worth too late. She imagined revenge looking like regret in his eyes. But standing there now beside the warm apartment lights, hearing Elijah's soft breathing down the hallway, she realized revenge had never truly been what healed her. Peace did. "I hope you find peace too, Ryan," she answered gently. Then she ended the call without anger. Without triumph. Just closure. A few minutes later, Ethan arrived at the apartment carrying Elijah asleep against his shoulder after helping Denise downstairs with groceries. The sight stopped Aaliyah briefly. Ethan moved carefully through the doorway, one large hand supporting the baby's back naturally, while city light reflected softly across his dark coat. Elijah stirred sleepily before resting his head against Ethan's chest again. Ethan looked toward Aaliyah with quiet concern. "Everything okay?" he asked. Aaliyah studied him for a long moment. The calm in his eyes, the steadiness in his presence, the way he protected softness without needing to announce it. Then she smiled slowly. Not the fragile smile of a woman trying to survive humiliation. A real one. Peaceful. Certain. "Yeah," she whispered softly. "Everything is finally okay." Outside, rain continued falling across Chicago while warm light filled the apartment windows high above the street. And for the first time in a very long time, Aaliyah no longer felt like someone abandoned. She felt like someone found. She did not win him back. She won herself.